welcome to Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sophie, and I'm here with your other co-host, Kelly.
Hey, everybody.
And two very fantastic guests. We have Matthew Weflin. He teaches philosophy at Xavier University. Hello, Matthew.
I just want to say St. Xavier.
St. Xavier University.
Hello.
Fake news.
Fake news. And we have Chris, who's a lawyer from Kansas. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
So we originally were just planning to talk about one topic today, which was the rise of fake news in the American political landscape. But then some pretty exciting things happened today.
You seemed especially excited by these today, Sophie.
I was particularly excited because I called it. Over the weekend, some news outlets were reporting that a few indictments might be released today in the Justice Department's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. And today we discovered that Paul Manafort, who was one of Trump's campaign chairs, who resigned or was fired, I think, 80 days before the election but was the campaign chair when he snagged the Republican nomination, was being indicted on 12 counts, mostly involving money laundering.
But with the deliciously named one of conspiracy to, what was it? Conspiracy against the United States.
Yes. Which I gather is a pretty vague term.
Sure, but it sounds great.
It sounds really sexy. And then Rick Gates, who is his associate. And then we also learned that George, I'm going to butcher his name.
Papadopoulos.
Papadopoulos? There we go. I've been trying to say it all day, and it sounds silly when I say it. I feel like it needs to sound differently, but I guess that's how you say it. Papadopoulos actually secretly pled guilty to a charge of lying to the FBI earlier this month, and that was a little more surprising and potentially a little bit more exciting because I don't think anybody expected that. I think most people expected that Manafort would be indicted because his house was searched in July. But I had actually never heard of this guy, but he was a foreign policy advisor, and Trump name-checked him several times in the media. So he's been photographed sitting in the room talking to Trump. So he was clearly involved in the campaign, and it seems like he may be cooperating with the FBI right now. So this is pretty big news.
Now Trump doesn't know him, though, right?
Oh, yeah. And I should say the White House is also claiming that he was like an unpaid volunteer.
They're like, Papa who?
Which,
he was a janitor, maybe? I don't know.
He was unpaid, but he was not like a guy licking, stamps for envelopes in the back. He was an actual senior foreign policy advisor. So I just wanted to sort of gut check everybody and see what your reaction to that news was when you heard about it this morning.
Well, are we talking about the world the way it used to be, or the way the world is now?
The way the world is now. What was your first reaction?
My first reaction is, what the fuck's up with Paul Ryan?
I'm pretty sure the first thing I said to my husband was, but her emails.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple of people who've been passing memes around that say, but his emails now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you send an email that's like, just in from Russia.
Yeah, literally, wasn't one of the headings like new message from Russia or something? Like, kind of like collusion 101 that like you don't name your emails like super secret important collusion email. But yeah, did anybody think that it was big news when they heard it, or did they think more of the same?
Well, it's clearly big news for us, but I think that the low information voter out there who receives all of their information from low information news sources, it's not going to have much impact. They were talking about burger emojis or something on Fox News today.
Yeah, Fox was like literally talking about nothing burgers this morning.
I can see Trump bleeding a few percentage points here and there on the margins, people who actually look at different news sources, but until there's something that names him and there's like a recording, maybe, sort of a smoking gun situation, I really don't think politically it's going to have the impact that we want it to have, or that anyone from the old world with old world notions of, justice and normality and righteousness and all these sorts of things, that no one cares.
Well, but there's more to politics than just approval ratings, right? I mean, if he can't accomplish anything, which he already was having trouble doing, right? They were having trouble never got health care through. They're already struggling with taxes. If they can't do anything because they're so constantly distracted by all this other stuff, and clearly this is getting under Trump's skin and it's going to be a huge distraction, well, that's also important politically.
I think that's probably the best case scenario, is that 2 or 3 senators get antsy and block stuff, basically.
I think at this point, if Trump would just shut up, which I know isn't likely to happen, reading through the entire indictment, there's really nothing that links him. I mean, because there's obviously some very damaging stuff against Manafort and Gates, and they were real idiots when it came to covering it up. But it was, talking about lobbying on behalf of Ukraine and the Ukrainian president and their party that's pro-Russia. And there wasn't really anything in there tied to Trump, at least not yet. So if Trump would just shut up and say, yeah, this has nothing to do with me, then it might not affect him that much. But Lord knows he's not going to do that.
Yeah, that's like the advice that all defense attorneys give to clients. So if
don't get on Twitter.
If Colonel Sanders or whatever the hell his name is could just say, yo, shut up for the next few months, he might actually weather the storm, but he's probably going to hang himself over and over on Twitter and in interviews and whatever. I guess that's a good thing.
Well, so the question is, it seems like Mueller is probably trying to flip Manafort, right? I mean, that...
Oh, yeah.
I'm not, any sort of legal scholar, but that's what everything I'm reading is telling me, that's probably the play here. So, the real question...
Yeah, looking at everything he's charged with, and if he gets the max on everything, he's facing 75 years in prison.
Right. So, if you're Manafort, do you flip? I mean, I don't see why he'd be at all loyal to Trump, but...
Isn't he in his 70s?
He's 75.
Yeah, he doesn't want to die in prison, does he?
No, and
flipping yesterday.
I don't think that he has any reason to be loyal to Trump, except that Trump could pardon him.
But Mueller brought charges in New York or something?
I don't think he's yet brought them. He's in
working
talks to
with
or something.
The Attorney General of one state or other. And Trump can't pardon state offenses, only federal offenses. Who knows?
Chris, I wanted to ask your opinion on something that I feel like is getting brought up a lot in more liberal news media outlets. In the Papadopoulos, did I say it right? I hope so, indictment papers, it seems like there's a footnote where they say that the Trump campaign specifically wanted to send him to talk to the Russians. They wanted to send a low-level person so that they didn't send a signal. And people seem to be making a lot about this possibly being evidence of collusion. Do you think that makes any sense, or is that a way overreaction?
I think it makes sense that sending a low-level person may make it seem like they're covering themselves, but once it's found out, it might seem more damaging. It does make it seem like if he was specifically sent, then more people higher up probably knew something, as opposed to it just being something behind the scenes that people were trying to do to help Trump out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if someone is wary enough, someone high up enough is wary. They're wary.
They're recognizing that there's something wrong with what they're doing.
They're wary, but they're still willing.
Yeah.
So we pretty much don't think that this is. I don't know. Do we think this is affecting the White House? Because it seems like Trump he's like freaking out, but he's also been like less freaking out than I would expect. Do you think somebody's taken his phone away?
Well, I mean, he did tweet this morning that why aren't Crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus?
Well,
saying it was years before Paul Manafort was a part of the Trump campaign, but one of the charges is for false statements that they gave in November after he resigned from the campaign. So
yeah, well, and I don't know how great a defense it is to be like, yes, they were, these terrible criminals, and then I hired them.
Yeah, exactly. That at minimum, he didn't do any vetting, and so that makes you question his judgment on a number of appointments.
I don't think it will hurt him with anybody who's already pro-Trump, because I think at this point it's pretty clear that there's nothing that's going to affect their opinion of him. I mean, if things that came out during the campaign didn't affect their opinion of him, this isn't going to.
It just blows my mind because all the people I know who are pro-Trump, well, most of, with the exception of one person, all the people I know who are pro-Trump are people who grew up during the Cold War and therefore are people that you would expect to be really sensitive about Russian meddling in U.S. elections, and yet...
I think the thing is they don't believe it. They think it's the Democrats who are behind it.
If there is actual written or auditory smoking gun evidence of Trump's involvement with Russia, I think that, like you say, Sophie, there are people who are very anti-Russia. And so they just don't believe it, but if there was something that was incontrovertible and could incontrovertibly tie Trump to it, that's what I think would start to actually erode his support among the base, the deplorables.
But Trump himself doesn't have to have been guilty of collusion, right? Like, he is still probably guilty of obstruction of justice with the firing of Comey, which, I mean, that alone, I mean, he's already committed the impeachable offense. We already know about the impeachable offense.
Well, but Kelly...
He's committed multiple impeachable offenses.
I think what everybody's waiting for is like, okay, you committed one impeachable offense, but will you commit two? Because, just don't do it again, okay?
I mean,
don't fire Mueller.
Clause.
No, nobody cares about that. No one
I care.
People can't say it, so they don't care about it. No, it's like, you fired one guy, and that was really bad, but, you're new. It was your first month, Now it's like, you've been at it a year, are you really going to fire this guy? That's when things will get really interesting. It's probably 50-50 odds whether he fires Mueller or not, And if he does, then I think the conversation gets a lot more serious. And maybe congressional Republicans maybe start to wonder if they should cut their losses or if they should try to ride it out for a tax cut. It's like, which will harm your fortunes more, blowing the tax cut or supporting the guy who it becomes clearer and clearer, is worse than Nixon? I don't know.
So my question that doesn't have an answer is, there's the thing that our Constitution has no way of addressing is, let's say Trump actually did nothing wrong. Let's just take that as a possibility for a moment. He has done nothing for which he should be removed from office, but it becomes very clear that he would not have won without the wrongdoing of others. We have no way of addressing that.
There needs to be an amendment. Not literally, literally.
An election redo amendment?
Well, or some sort of, I don't know, laying ground rules for what constitutes, a legitimate victory, legitimate electoral, I don't know. I don't know how you could frame it such that, it's like, do you include social media stuff in that? Do you include coordination with foreign entities? I'm not sure. But yeah, there's nothing in it now. And so nothing can happen. The only two processes we have are the two processes that are in there already. One is incompetence, which I think there are arguments that, look, I think the defense